What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Rooted in Resilience podcast. Today we have the seed oil scout on, and we are going to talk all about seed oils, its history, how we can avoid them, what the dangers are of consuming excessive quantities of them, and what about them is so harmful in the body. So I think first, maybe we can give a little background. I know we're going to remain anonymous, but Seed Oil Scout, what are you sharing and promoting on your platforms, and how did you kind of get into this omega-6 PUFA information?
Yeah, hey Ash and Sarah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, call me Scout, Seed Oil Scout. So Seed Oil Scout's it's a platform for basically bringing transparency specifically to restaurant food, um, and which I think is kind of like, if assuming you've kind of went down the seed oil rabbit hole and you're trying to avoid seed oils. I think restaurants are kind of the most challenging thing. And I'm a city dweller. I live in New York City. So I was particularly frustrated, I guess, with my options dining out, right? And just the complete lack of transparency. I'd say the way I got into it was probably like cooking for myself during COVID. That kind of stopped like the it kind of put it was a weird time in that it put New York City on pause, and everyone had to get out of their routine of like eating every meal out and going out every weekend and kind of like live a little bit more, slowed down lifestyle, do some cooking for themselves and stuff. And from there, listening to podcasts on nutrition and stuff, I kind of opened my eyes a bit to, kind of how nasty some of the stuff in our food is, and especially in restaurant food. So when restaurants opened back up in New York, I had a much healthier diet, but I was like, oh no, wait, I don't want to eat at any of these. So I try, I'm an engineer. I build mobile apps for a living. So, I wanted to see how I could solve that problem by letting people share information, right? So it's basically it's a map, and for each restaurant, if you speak to the waiter, right, you can just write down what they told you about the oils used at the restaurant. And doing that, we have about 2,000 reports in the app. There's hundreds of reports in New York City, and now I know where to eat lunch. So yeah, that's basically the story.
Yeah, so before I actually planned this podcast with you, I had already downloaded your app because I was planning out a trip for me and my boyfriend, and I was just
Fiance.
Oh, fiance. And I was just proactively looking for places we can go. And so I love the map feature, but I gotta say it is so disappointing to see,
Our area?
Yeah, how few and far between good options are. And that's mostly because we're in, and where I was searching as well, is a super rural area, not like New York City and stuff, where I'm sure there's a bit more options. Even on different sides of our state, there's better options. But it is so cool that you've put this together. And so we kind of wanted to start with more of a larger backdrop on seed oils. So how would you say that seed oils kind of originated, and why are they so pervasive in all of our food here in America?
Let's talk a little history.
Yeah. So, I mean, the history, like really kind of going back, I think essentially like the American side of it has a lot to do with corn and soy subsidies. Basically, anytime a nation has been put at like total war, their resources are incredibly stressed, and they have to find creative ways to make more calories as cheaply as possible, right? So like margarine was actually created by Napoleon's army when he needed a cheaper butter for it to feed like this, massive war machine he had, right? So that kind of was our first bite of like kind of synthetic fats, right? But I mean, seed oils, a lot of it comes from during World War II. The government heavily subsidized soy, mainly because soy is an interesting crop. You two would know more about this than me, but I believe it pulls nitrogen from the air rather than the ground. So it's very efficient to grow, right? So our nation's kind of been subsidizing corn and soy through World War II, right? So it's kind of just the cheapest crop to grow by far. So a lot of industries have cropped up around finding very creative things to do with it, and everything from high fructose corn syrup to seed oils, right? Soybean oil is probably the biggest offender. soybean oil makes up about 20% of American calories, which is just crazy, right? Like, most people probably don't think of their diet like that, but it's incredibly pervasive at restaurants, and it's the level of polyunsaturated fat in soybean oil is very high. So I think, it's basically like, you could kind of call it capitalism and convenience, right? Like, liquid oils are a lot easier just to use and clean out of a deep fryer than say like saturated fats that are solid at room temperature. So restaurant margins are razor thin, so they show up a lot in restaurants, but they're very good for packaged foods as well. So I think that's kind of like the base of the story as to how they kind of took over.
Yeah, it's crazy how, when we overproduce things, we have to do something with the waste. And vegetable oils are just so cheap because of those government subsidies. And when you look back at the history, like 99% of the fats that we used to use in like 1900 was animal fats. Fast forward to today, animal fats are too expensive to use. It's just
Right.
mind blowing, right? And that is just a huge change in the fatty acid composition of our diets from 1900 to today. And it just falls in that timeline of the cholesterol fearing and the Ansel Keys. And so it was kind of like this orchestrated effort, maximize profits of these big companies because they could see how much money they can make off of these cheap waste byproducts, while also saying, hey, these foods are going to lower your cholesterol and they're heart healthy. And so it was like this combined effort where they could make a ton of money on these waste products. And now it's just like you said, it's tough. Like, our mom owns a restaurant and the margins are so thin. And so it's like, to no one's fault, truly. Not the farmer's fault, not the restaurant owner's fault. It's just the system that's been worked into our agriculture production for so long, and it just seems to be so pervasive, and it makes eating out at restaurants so hard. And so having this like app and resource where you can still socialize, you're not that oddball out and can be a little bit more normal, can hopefully help people along the way.
Yeah. I mean, I've even had like restaurant owners reach out to me and be like, they're kind of, especially if it's a larger restaurant. I had this one restaurant owner reach out to me. He's like, listen, like I stopped eating seed oils, but like I'm stuck. Like, here's how. Like, we had a phone call because I wanted to hear him kind of talk through it, and he was just like, the economics don't work for like a high throughput, like mid-market Italian restaurant, right? Like, I'm going to have to like triple or 5x my oil, which, he was spending like 20K a year on oil. And his margins were already so thin, right? So like, yeah, it's really hard. It's a supply chain thing, right? Like, these big restaurants, there's a whole supply chain set up for restaurants to basically get oil swapped in and out via like truck externally in the restaurant via hose, which is, very gross, but and they pull away the old oil as well, right? So there's just this big entrenched supply chain that you're fighting against, and the subsidies. And yes, like you said, like the cholesterol kind of scare science, we're still not really over. It's definitely a battle. I mean, and I think the best way, you really want to try to weed out restaurants where the owners are really passionate about food, because anyone who's passionate about food is likely using oils and fats with more character and truer to a cuisine, because there's no cuisine that depends on industrial seed oils, right? They're just too new. Like any authentic cuisine is going to depend, if you're doing it truly true to the cuisine, like it'll depend on whatever fats that cuisine kind of calls for, ancestrally or from like a heritage standpoint.
Yeah, you would imagine that a Italian restaurant would rely more on something like olive oil then in that case.
Yeah, but the problem is when if they're at scale, right? Like,
Yeah.
when a restaurant gets too big, they just start looking at everything as a line item, right? And then they see a big line item that says olive oil, and it's $40,000 a year, and they're like, oh well, if I use the blend, it's $15,000 a year, right? And that's how you end up with a half olive oil, Franken oil on your table.
I have a funny story about that. I was on a road trip and again looking for interesting places to go, and I took the route that you just recommended, where look for restaurants where they get creative with food. They seem to really care about the sourcing, and the different items on the menu might have more obscure options. So one of the options I saw that I was really excited about was beef brain. And so I get there, and of course I order that, and it's just clearly cooked in some sort of canola oil. And so even when I asked
Yeah.
if we could do butter instead, the only option they had was margarine. And so it does make sense. They have to make, work within their budget and obviously make some cuts where necessary. But it is unfortunate because it's so ironic to me. They have such a ancestral prized item like a beef brain and be able to source that, and then at the same time be using something that basically makes the end product toxic in a way. So it was just a very interesting, eye-opening experience. And I think after that moment, I was like, okay, I have to rely on this app, and this app only.
Yeah.
So yeah, but can I ask a question really quickly about what you were saying about the hose? So
Oh yeah.
are you saying that they pump in their oils through a hose from a truck?
Yes. So there's a company called RTI. I forget what it stands for, restaurant something. So I actually, there's a YouTube video, like a sales YouTube video that's pretty funny. It's called the RTI Total Oil Management System. But essentially for a big restaurant, the way their deep fryer is is operating is there's like a big tank, right? Like an oil tank outside of the restaurant. And there's a truck from RTI that comes in, attaches a hose to the outside of the restaurant, fills up that tank, and then sucks out a tank that has the old oil. And they might do that, once a month or once a week or whatever. The reason they do that is it just like it cuts the labor tremendously, right? Like they're able to refresh their deep fryer oil without actually like taking apart the fryer or anything, or like carrying boxes of oil. So for really high throughput restaurants, like that's how it's working. And they even have they literally have like dashboards where they can track their oil usage and stuff. Cause like at a high throughput restaurant, it's all about like keeping that margin, like there, right? Like keeping the margin as big as possible. So they're tracking like every, dime. They're looking at how much oil they're using every month and stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's the nature of like a big budget, like a big throughput restaurant. Now there's definitely high quality big restaurants, but I would say is like a rule as far as like the rules of thumb, being someone I've there are about 2,000 reports in the app. I've personally filed about 500 of them. So I've contacted a lot of restaurants, and that's definitely a trend, right? Like the bigger the restaurant is, the more likely they are, I would say, to make these compromises.
Yeah, I mean, again, it makes sense. The only restaurants I've been lucky enough to visit where I felt completely good ordering off the menu were more like small mom and pop, like really into food themselves. So
Yep.
another follow-up question on restaurants is what kind of restaurants typically use seed oils more? So you're saying the larger, more chain, or would you say it's kind of hit or miss?
Yeah. So, judging from some data on the app and just my experience, the cuisine obviously is one input, right? The cuisine matters. Ideally, like if you're okay with olive oil, and olive oil, olive oil fraud's a whole other controversy we could sort of talk about. But assuming, olive oil is better than seed oils, right? And it's most olive oils probably okay. A simple Mediterranean cuisine, right? Like a restaurant that's just like, this is an authentic Italian restaurant. This is an authentic Spanish restaurant, authentic Greek, right? I actually pulled the data into an Instagram post, and the ranking was Greek had the highest like oil safety score, then Italian, then Spanish, and then it gets a little more complicated, and I can cover that. But yeah, so I'd say first the cuisine. Second, I kind of call it like, why is this restaurant here? So like a good example is like in New York, the best restaurants, I'd say, like seed oil wise, are in West Village, right? And that's because West Village, there is like a kind of area with affluent locals, not tourists. So like the restaurants are trying to basically like have people who, have a lot of money and spend a lot of money and live in the neighborhood come back a lot, right? Whereas like there's other districts of New York where it's more like a tourist district and they're just trying to get you to come in once, right? So they'll have a big flashy sign and it'll look really exciting. But it's like covered in seed oils and you get a stomach ache after, but maybe the food looks really good on Instagram, right? But like in the West Village spot, like it's usually like very low key decor. It's like, more of like a real authentic, like cuisine, true to cuisine vibe. Like that's definitely a good sign. Somewhere small, also a good sign. And then, I mean, chains vary, right? Like there's a lot of chains popping up now that their whole brand is like against seed oils, right? I can name a bunch off the top of my head. There's a Springbone Kitchen in New York is vocally anti seed oil. Ziki in Austin is big, and they're moving to Miami. There's Naked Farmer that's around South Florida, and they have a location in Miami. There's a Aubergine Kitchen in Utah, and True Food Kitchen, which is all over the country. They recently kind of went like fully to olive oil. I believe they use a little sesame oil in some of the Asian dishes. But yeah, so it's all over the place. Each restaurant, these are small businesses, right? So they're all making like small decisions. So we can only look at like trends to try to inform us and stuff. But yeah.
Cool. So I guess let's move into when someone goes to a restaurant. I mean, first, you can check out Seed Oil Scout app to see if there is an option in your area for a potential restaurant that maybe has the option to not use seed oils, right? If you're going out to eat once in a while, seed oils are not going to kill you. It is one meal in the grand scheme of your lifetime. It's not going to cause significant damage. But let's say that, maybe your job requires you to travel Monday through Friday, or you are required to do a lot of like, team or work dinners where you guys are going out to eat and you kind of have to navigate living at restaurants. That's tough, right? That it's really tough to live a super healthy lifestyle when you're not cooking the majority of your meals. So based on the information that you've gathered in like forming this app, what are your general tips for people if, let's say, they can't find a restaurant that doesn't use seed oils? What would you? Sorry, that.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, that like doesn't allow you to swap out the seed oils. Like Sarah going to that restaurant and they said, "Oh no, the only option is margarine."
Right.
What are things on the menu that are typically super high in fats and seed oils, or what are the best options to order on the menu?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing to consider is that like not certain ways of consuming seed oils are worse than others. And by that, I'm specifically kind of pointing to the deep fryer. The deep fryer is like particularly bad because it's sitting there bubbling for an unspecified amount of time. There's no food regulation about like, oh, you have to change the fryer oil every day, right? Like it could have been sitting there for a couple days, right? And as an oil sits there and gets heated and reheated, like the science is very clear that the amount of like toxic compounds like aldehydes and free radicals that form just increases dramatically, right? So I would say like, just being able to recognize what is deep fried on a menu and not ordering that is a good start. Unfortunately, America absolutely loves our deep fried food, right? So, and it's a lot of like the food we associate as like fun in our childhood, right? Like French fries and maybe fried calamari and stuff. But the word crispy should be a red flag for you. So that that's a start. I'd say aiolis, like in mayo-based sauces and salad, and also salad dressings are another big source of seed oils, right? But at least those are cold. They're not, bubbling vats of, electrons. so
there's such a debate about seed oils right now. And even if you consume these things cold, like our digestive tract should be 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Like
Right.
that's hot. And
No, yeah,
they can
you're
still oxidize in our digestive tract. And there is evidence that when the oxidation of these susceptible polyunsaturated fatty acids are in our digestive tract, they do oxidize and they do form toxic byproducts and they do increase the leakiness of our gut. And so it's just, there's such conflicting opinions on the seed oil consumption between like two different camps in the nutrition space.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I agree with that, right? But I guess I'm just going by the assumption that like I'm just trying to frame the deep fryer as like definitely
I guess right.
bad.
I see your point. Like
Yeah.
there's no arguing that the deep fryer is like you're literally cooking food in fat that's already oxidized and then
Right.
it's going into your system already oxidized.
Yeah. But so you should still no, totally. So yeah, I guess what I kind of meant to say was like, so yeah, the mayo-based sauces, and you should ask for like aiolis and like salad dressings on the side, right? Like if you're ordering a hamburger, right? Like get the aioli on the side, right? If it comes with an aioli, right? And swap out the French fries, right? And because you just, you probably want the seed oils just completely off your plate, so you don't accidentally eat them or whatever. Other things, so if you're at a brunch, right there, ways to cook eggs that don't involve oil at all, right? Like soft boiling or poaching can be great options, right? And certain things, knowing kind of what's like having an eye for items that might be baked or grilled is also a good, or, perhaps if they use sometimes they'll use like a wood fired stove or something, and there's like much less oil in the cooking process. A lot of times hamburgers, like they don't add additional oil to the grill, but that's kind of wishful thinking. They usually do add a little bit, but I think if you don't have like information from the restaurant and they can't make substitutions for you, you're really in a situation where you're just trying to consume as few seed oils as possible, like by weight, right? Or by like milliliters, right? So, if there's like some on a grill that they use as a spray, that's not as bad as like them soaking a bunch of like dousing a bunch of vegetables in them to saute or something like that. Some gotcha items, like I would say like crispy Brussels sprouts can be deceiving because you'd think they wouldn't be deep fried, but I think a lot of times they are. I mean, breads a lot of times will have seed oils, which is unfortunate. But I think like, I don't know, you can generally, if you order a steak, right, then any red meat is less likely to need oils in a pan, right? So you can generally like ask them if you're eating a steak to not use any oil, and they're not really going to argue with you. So yeah, I think that's kind of a good start. It's definitely hard, right? Like you don't really want to eat raw vegetables usually. So yeah. I don't know. I'd say, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
In summary, so you would say like grilled, look for the words like grilled or baked, and then hold the sauce.
Yes. Yeah, that's good principles. Not fried, grilled or baked, hold any sauces. Yeah, that's a good base to work off of.
It's so hit or with all that stuff.
Sarah, give us some examples of like some general meals that you could order at a restaurant.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, I think baked is always the best way. So unfortunately, like you said, fries typically you want to avoid because in the past, of course, they were fried in tallow like McDonald's, but now that's obviously phased out. So baked potatoes,
right?
Really pretty good. Like you said, steak. So I would get like a baked potato steak, and then maybe like a steamed vegetable or like a fruit cup would be good, or just things that don't require a ton of extra preparation. Because even if you do like their risotto or something that you would think would be good, typically they're sauteed or whatever with a bunch of different vegetables that are all cooked in oil. And like you said, the sauces all are doused in oil. Even when you get into things like buns, which you think was just be bread, added ingredients in almost all bread in the store is vegetable oil. So yeah. It's so tricky. And that's why there's so much nuance to this and why I appreciate your app so much, because it kind of does it all for you. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
really
yeah,
agree with the baked and grilled.
yeah, baked, grilled, anything steamed. Again, I agree. So sometimes, like, there are even a couple dumpling places in New York that don't use seed oil, surprisingly, because if you only get the steamed dumplings. Um, but yeah, no, it's very hard. It's surprising, because restaurants, when you talk to them, they have no concept of it, that they're not thinking like we're thinking. Like if from their perspective, like vegetable oils are the best thing ever. They're heart healthy and they're dirt cheap, right? Like that company RTI I mentioned has like this whole pamphlet about how heart healthy soybean oil is. Like a restaurant sent it to me, right? So they're just using it. They're they're sautéing everything, because like high heat is kind of what makes restaurant food tastier than what you get at home, right? Like getting that like kind of Maillard reaction, that like crispy sear on the vegetables as well as like the meat and stuff. It's kind of what they're going for. So yeah, definitely baked, grilled, steamed is a good sign.
The sauce.
Yeah,
No,
salt and
no
the salt.
sauce. No
Yeah,
sauce.
Specifically say no sauce.
no salt. Yeah.
Say WCE sauce.
Yeah. Well, another tip, and this is what I use, is I just say when I'm ordering, I'm highly allergic to vegetable oils. So
Right.
please not add them. And usually when you use that word, I'm allergic, they're a little bit more aware of like, all right, let's tell the chef they can't touch or contaminate this food with their other foods, because obviously that could have a reaction. And I know that seems like I'm taking advantage of things, but I'm one of the crazy people who would prefer to at all times avoid vegetable
embrace
oils.
Embrace it.
I do embrace
Accept
it.
I think
So-
that's an important thing to consider is for someone who has been cooking from home for so long, you've probably flipped the fatty acid profile of the fats inside your body. And so you actually do become a little bit more sensitive to the intake of these things.
Well, provided you're not using vegetable oils.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're cooking from home and using good fats, and then you go to restaurants and you all of a sudden are doused in a bunch of seed oils, I think you're going to be a little bit more reactionary to someone who instead kind of consumes these on like a daily or regular basis.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean,
experience.
Yeah, I think I can definitely I noticed there's just this it's when people describe food as like greasy, like that post greasy meal feeling that you kind of get in your stomach. Like that grease is like it's seed oils usually, and it's like you don't get that feeling from like a good meal that like a comparable meal that would be cooked with healthier fats. Going back to your allergy point, it's kind of funny. So one of the main ways we get the reports in the app is something I call the auto mailer, which is essentially when you search a restaurant in the app scrapes their website for an email, and it shows a little alert on the screen if it finds the email address, and then we send this template email to them. But I can read it out right now. It's kind of funny because it's basically what you were saying. It's hi, a member of my party is allergic to many common cooking oils: canola, vegetable, grapeseed, sunflower, soybean, but they are fine with olive, avocado, coconut oil, butter, and animal fats. And you can edit that, as you see fit. Was wondering how they should best navigate the menu. Are any of these oils in your sauces or aioli or used to cook proteins? Anything to avoid in particular? Thank you. So,
Sarah, like that? That's beautiful.
But yeah, so I just, basically I've just been, me and the scouts have been shooting that email to restaurants across the country. And often, because it's unfortunate that you have to kind of be deceptive, but the word allergy, I think, is helpful. Except in some place, there are some times when like a good restaurant with that basically they'll be like, oh, we don't have any in house, but like we don't use any seed oils, but like I don't want to guarantee that you couldn't trigger your allergy. So, but yeah, I think sometimes you do got to pull out the A word.
The A word, yeah. So another funny story. Again, before I found your app, and I feel like you probably don't have many like ice cream places on your app, but I was looking for an ice cream place. So I was like, hey, my daughter highly allergic to vegetable oils. Is there a safe flavor she can get? And I was also asking for like, do you have any flavors without the gums and all the weird ingredients?
Yeah.
But I do think that it goes back to what you were saying, where most restaurants don't understand that vegetable oils are actually not favorable. And so they might not be receptive to the question or as adamant to provide an accurate answer if they don't understand that there's a reason that you're asking that goes beyond just preference.
Right. That's another reason I focus so much on like emails and stuff is like, especially the staff at the restaurant, they they often get confused. So let's say you just show up to the restaurant and you want to like talk to the waiter and avoid vegetable oils. It can be a little bit frustrating or hard because the waiter usually doesn't really understand why you're asking, and they're also very busy. I've had waiters just tell me something that was inconsistent with an email I followed up on later, right? Like basically they just made something up. You really need to make sure they're like, go back and ask the kitchen, right? Because like if they just kind of like shoot it from the hip and they don't seem very confident, right? Like that's usually a bad sign. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think that allergy or like I react to that food, like bring in like the health aspect. I think that that's a little bit, you're not trying to convince someone that this is bad for you. Like you don't want to you're not trying to convince the waiter who's already like super busy. Like you said, the approach is not to say, I'm doing this because it's bad for you, because they don't have the time for that. They're not going to listen to you. Instead, if you use the word allergy, they seem to be a little bit more receptive and understanding of it. But I think it's interesting because, you hear about these different restaurants that use a variety of these oils. And typically vegetable oil is some mixture of corn and soy. However, one of the, fatty acids that a lot of people are looking out to not eat is linoleic acid, which is an omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid. And so I just pulled up a chart that lists the percentage linoleic acid content of different oils. And I think it's just interesting to see these because I think a variety of these other oils are also used. So on the top of the list is safflower oil, and it's 78%. Then grapeseed oil, 73%. Poppy seed oil, 70%. Sunflower oil, 68%. Hemp oil is 60%. Corn oil is 59%. Cottonseed oil, 54%. Soybean oil, 51%. So there's just this like wide range, but I think a lot of people will, I've heard some people be like, well, we use safflower oil or we use sunflower oil. And not everyone may know that like, hey, that's actually like it's kind of like higher in some of the omega-6s than soybean oil.
Right. Yeah, it's really bad. It sounds better too. It's like, oh, sunflowers.
Yeah, pretty sunflowers.
Yeah.
So I think just being like, a little bit more adamant on butter if you can, if they are willing to
be careful with that because the margarine.
Yeah.
And you got to be careful with the olive oil too because of the blends, right? Like they're trying to get you at every point. But so margarine, I've had less. To me, like blended olive oil seems like more of a issue than margarine, I guess. I don't know. Maybe because I'm like, I think I have a tendency to like ask about the blends more. Maybe I might. There could be some margarine slipping past the goalie, I guess. But yeah, they're both kind of terrible. I mean, I would again just say like try to eat at a place that you like kind of looks like it would care about using real butter. Otherwise, you'd want to clarify, and it is just hard because like you have to be like, yeah, I'm allergic to margarine. And I mean, I think, the kind of the lesson that like you were saying, right? It's like a meal is not going to kill you, right? Like you can't, but kind of the project and the app is to make it so that a lot of people in a lot of cities are eating less seed oils, right? Like you're spending more time at restaurants that we know don't use seed oils. And like, hopefully that's sort of driving market preferences and stuff. Cause like, the community behind that the community of people that care about this is extremely diverse and like definitely growing, right? Like take like in New York, like the range of places that are vocally against seed oils is pretty interesting, right? Like there's this one place that I just kind of found out about recently, and it's called The Well. And it's like a high-end wellness spa with like a sauna and a cold plunge. And they sell all these like, beauty serums and stuff. But like they also have this great organic restaurant. They have like organic bone broth and like, wild fish and great grass finished beef and stuff. Right. And like it's always packed, right? With people who you might not like, these are like just people like who are healthy people in New York, right? Like they're not like, it's not like it's like some secret clubhouse of people who care about seed oils, right? So like, I mean, I think it's the conversation's kind of moving there, right? And it is frustrating that like now people for so long we just kind of didn't care about it at all. But like we're paying. I had a tweet that basically, essentially, like so we've paid right now we pay less of a percentage of our take home income on food than any point in history and any other country, right? It's about, I think, 10% of our take home income is on food, where it used to be like 20% in 1950. But like we're paying for it in other ways, which is medical bills and like, just crazy incidences of like IBS and all other kinds of gut health issues, right? So like, I think it's a slow process, but we're waking up to the fact that like, let's do the prevention here and eat like actual whole foods and specifically oils, right? Because I mean, I think you two would understand this better than me, but like oils and fats stick with you when you eat them, right? Like when you eat a carb, if it's a pure carbohydrate, whether it's glucose, fructose, sucrose, like I think it gets broken down into and used as energy. But lipids and fats are like, they're kind of what you're composed of, right? Like our cell membranes are lipids, right? So when you have like a fatty acid profile, when you're eating these linoleic acids and getting the most majority of your calories from oils with a different fatty acid profile, like you can measure that in your body tissue for years, right? So it's like the fats are particularly important, and I think like you can just tell on like Google Trends and everything, and it's why I built this app. Like I think people are coming around to caring, but for now, yes, it's hard for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think we should have done this in the beginning, but that's okay. I think we can touch now on some of the reasons, like you brought up a great point there. Some of the reasons why we don't want to consume seed oils in excess. And again, we're not trying to create orthorexia here, not trying to make people fear going out to eat. It's just the sad reality in America that most restaurants are just going to use seed oils. And so, like you mentioned, fats stay with us. And I think that this is ultimately where there's this disagreement between some nutrition camps where some people are saying, like, there's nothing wrong with seed oils, because in the context of a diet where you aren't over consuming calories, your body is going to burn those PUFAs. It's going to oxidize those PUFAs because, in my opinion, your body is viewing those as a toxin and wants to get rid of those. But the problem is over time, your body's going to burn those fats. And in the oxidation of those fats, it's producing harmful chemicals, harmful toxic byproducts. And those things are going to add up over time. They're going to cause cellular damage. They're going to hinder your metabolic rate in the long run. But in the context of a calorically controlled diet where you're not over consuming calories, you're not going to be storing a ton of them. However, I would say most Americans are not consuming a calorically controlled diet. They're probably over consuming foods. And in those contexts, heck yeah, your body is storing those fats. And I want to say the half-life is somewhere above 600 days, which means that these fats are sticking with you for a long time. And this is something that we have studied in depth for our animals here at the farm. We've completely changed the way that our chickens eat, because we've been able to change the fatty acid profile of their fat tissue, of the fats in their egg yolks by the composition of the fats that they eat. We have like data from a research lab showing this. For a chicken, it takes like 30 to 60 days. For a human, it takes like 2 years for your body to cycle through these different 4 years. I think it's 4 years. Wow. It may be 3 to 4. I don't know the half-life, but it's a long time. And that's just unfortunate, right? And like you were saying, it's just this type of fat has increased in our diet exponentially over the last, 50 to 75 years. And this is a topic for another conversation, but I would say that PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, so that's omega-6s and omega-3s, don't need to be overconsumed in excess. And there's just a huge push to like consume a ton of those these days in the diet. And, talking about vegetable oil and it being like a byproduct of corn and soy crop production, linseed oil, which is flax seed oil, which is high in omega-3, it's promoted as this health product. It used to be used to paint barns. Like it used to be a paint product. And then it, some better technology came along and that needed to be used up. So it's just this result, like you said, of like capitalism and like always trying to make margins slimmer and slimmer. And we have to use up this waste. And unfortunately, it's infiltrated into our food system. Sarah, what are some other like health consequences of excessive consumption of PUFAs, omega-6s?
Well, based on the work of Dr. Ray Peat, I know that there's a lot of, like you were saying, metabolic suppressive effects on the thyroid. And so that's another thing that we see a lot with people who eat a lot of high PUFA foods. They have a slower metabolic rate. They have more hormonal issues. Like Ashley was saying, it gets stored in the fat tissue because the body doesn't want to release it. Like it is a toxin to the body. And so storing it in the body away is actually a protective mechanism of the body. And so, this just further contributes to things like diabetes, where a higher carb intake can be problematic for somebody because the consumption of polyunsaturated fatty acids hinders that person's carb tolerance and utilization. And so we have a course called Rooted in Resilience, and we see a lot of women coming into the course who have an extremely tough time tolerating carbs. And one of the first things we obviously encourage is to reduce their intake of PUFAs. And so when we think of things like you were saying, people in New York City who live more of a fast-paced life, they have a social life. Yeah.
What are you saying about us?
I didn't even say it that way. But, they're going out every week. Let's say they go out once. I just still believe fully that adds up over time, consumption of these foods. And so having this app to be able to, maybe make it once every other week, or maybe you go to a seed oil safe place every 3 weekends of the month is just such a awesome asset. And so that's why we were so excited to bring you on, because we were excited about this app.
It's so sad because we are at this place of like, this is what we have to resort to. We have to resort to someone spending their time making an app.
Sending emails about allergic.
Sending an email to all these restaurants, trying to figure out what restaurants don't use seed oils. And our friend Masha went on a trip last December. Did she go to Switzerland or Sweden? One of the two. Switzerland? I think she went to Switzerland. And like, seed oils were just not even a part of the picture. Like, it just wasn't even, like, she could just go to a restaurant and order something because they used butter. It's just what is happening there. And here in America, it is so different. Well, and this is what we've had to resort to.
It's the same thing that makes America the greatest, nation on earth is what corrupts our food system. I think like it's just like when it's kind of looser capitalism and like less of an entrenched culinary culture, right? Like European countries, they have a stronger like ancestral line, right? Like they're just, it's crazier for them to change their diets, right? Like they've been eating the same way forever, and so yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think we were having this conversation on a different podcast where we didn't really grow up with a culture around food, if that makes sense. Like we, at least for Ashley and myself, we didn't grow up with recipes from our ancestors and stuff that were in our house all the time and taught to cook. And so we're not really educated from a young age, and thus we're just kind of thrown into whatever society's eating, whatever is at restaurants, even quote unquote healthy restaurants is just the norm. Yeah. So I totally agree. That's maybe what sets apart some place like Switzerland, who's still in their culture with eating. And I remember listening, I think it was Danny Roddy, who's in Mexico, saying that even it ain't safe there. Even the food on the streets there is now just like laced with seed oil. So I think
maybe it's the proximity.
I think it's
It is. It's the
breeding
same
other
thing.
countries too.
Same thing with Coca-Cola in Mexico.
Yeah.
We've kind of a lot of our like industrial food. I think it's just a supply chain thing. It's like easy for us to kind of, especially and you know they're a nation that could use like cheap food for sure, right? Cheap calories. So yeah, I think we pipe a lot of those cheap oils down to Mexico for sure. I mean, yeah, good.
Coca-Cola is another, like you said, like, butter, tallow and lard has transitioned to vegetable oil, and then like pure sugar has transitioned to high fructose corn syrup
Right.
and all these other things. And so there's just like this gradual degradation of each product.
Yeah, you have to like go on the dark web to find a true Mexican Coke.
Yeah.
Sugar. Anyway. But
yeah, I mean, tacos are one of the toughest things to find in the app, right? Like, it's very hard to find seed oil free tacos. I think there's actually one place in New York City that we found in Greenpoint, Taqueria Ramirez. They use lard, but otherwise, I mean, it took a long time to find that spot. And there's like a couple in LA, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Another rabbit hole we'll have to go down another time is like, all right, the vegetable oils are high in PUFAs, but then the animals fed the vegetable oils, like monogastric animals. It's I think step one, avoid the seed oils when you can. I think that getting like a lot more nuanced and deep into, conventional pork and chicken, that would be like a higher level next step.
Right.
And,
yes,
like we said with our chickens, we showed that if you change their diet, the types of fat that they consume, they're monogastric animals. So that will come up in their fat tissues. They're like us, whereas cattle are ruminant animals. And so they have this enzyme that's able to convert some of the polyunsaturated fatty acids in maybe grain that they were fed at a feedlot. They're able to convert some of that into saturated fats. And so I guess that would be kind of like a more advanced, higher level piece of advice when you go to a restaurant. When in doubt, order beef, because more than likely the restaurant, again, has really slim margins and they have to source these products where they can. And ordering pork and chicken from conventional confinement operations, that is going to be the cheapest option for them. And unfortunately, those animals are stuffed into buildings and fed corn and soy, which again, soy more than corn is going to be higher in fat, higher in PUFAs. And so that will reflect in their fatty acid tissue. So the advanced step after the seed oil would be prioritize ordering beef.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do that myself, right? And I guess I don't want to overwhelm people, but it's definitely you are what you eat, and you are what you eats, right? Like, you really need to your goal is to kind of get out of this, like, the corn and soy based like food system that America kind of rests on to the best of your ability. And like you said, like ruminant animals, like lamb, cows, deer, et cetera. They basically, because they have a multi-chambered stomach, they don't just directly take that linoleic acid from the corn and soy and put it in their, in their tissues. That's what you were saying. So yeah, definitely, the advanced thing is, you don't want to eat a ton of like lard or pork fat or chicken skin from conventionally raised animals. It's pretty much just as bad in that, like, their fatty acid profile is very similar to a seed oil, sadly. And it's like, it's not, this is like very easy to measure objectively, and it's just kind of true, right? So, I mean, the app, we do have tags for like pastured chicken, pastured pork, and grass-fed, grass-finished beef, which can be helpful. You can filter the map by that, but like the tagging is not always perfect. Again, it's if you can, and like obviously these restaurants are more expensive, but I personally would rather eat out half as often at a place that cares about sourcing and is doing things right than eating out double and having it be kind of just like run of the mill crap that frankly also that you could maybe make at home or something. So yeah, but totally, it's tough out there. I mean, we can't all move to Tuscany though. So
Yeah, definitely. You bring up a good point. It's if you're going to go out to eat, make it worth it. And it might be a little bit more expensive, but at least, you're getting that experience and can feel a little bit better about who you're supporting. So with that said, oh, Ashley,
just final piece of advice. You're not going to be perfect. And at the end of the day, if it's once in a while you go to a restaurant, our advice to people is, if you don't have any choice, like let's say it's more of a buffet style or you get fed a plate, just bring some vitamin E with you. Vitamin E can help stop the chain reaction of like harmful oxidation of certain PUFAs. So just bring some vitamin E and enjoy your time. Try not to eat in a super stressed out state where you're fearing every bite, because if your body is in a stressed out state, you're not going to digest the food as well. And so just try to enjoy your experience, take some vitamin E with you, and don't freak out because it's a once in a while thing.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's good advice. You really like, if you're there, you're there. Just, don't like guilt yourself into craziness about it.
So with all of this said, what's happening next in the app, and how can we all support you as people who, care about restaurants and not eating in excessive seed oils? How can we further along the app ourselves?
Yeah. So, I mean, the app, I think it's like in a great state right now to handle a whole bunch more scouts. And the hardest thing kind of is that it's a one person show, a one man band. So I do all the content on social media and the Twitter, and I code as well. Right. So I'm kind of, and it's not my full-time job. So I'm stretched a little bit thin on promotion. From a technical side, like the app will continue to improve. I'm adding a new feature that's coming soon is reviews on top of reports. So a report is like facts about the ingredients and the oils, and reviews are just going to be like your opinion on the restaurant. Like, you can cook crappy food with like olive oil, right? Like it's like, okay, they don't use seed oils, but like, how's the restaurant? And for people to add more pictures and stuff. So, I kind of want to have like an actual dining community there, because I think you trust the reviews from people who care about seed oils more than you would just some like random Yelp person. So yeah, so what's next for the app? Like, I'll keep launching great features, making sure it's up and running and working properly. But yeah, the biggest help I can use is like exactly stuff like this, right? Like, have me on your have me on your podcast. Share the app on your story or on Instagram. And any ways people can think of working together is great. Because it's really, it's just, for me, it's about getting the message out there. It takes a lot of time to put together good content on Instagram, and it's something I'm like totally new to. So any help with like content, especially now because everything's reels, everyone's making video, and it's like I have to be anonymous for my job, so I'm not exactly about to go out there and start doing hidden camera work with restaurants or anything. So so yeah, just share the word, spread the word, tell a friend. I'll keep up my end of the bargain, keep the app operational, and let's if you're in a city, right, like I can almost guarantee you'll learn something if you check out the app today, especially New York, LA, and Austin. I personally like the restaurants in New York, which surprise me all the time. There's like hundreds of reviews in New York. So yeah.
I think the most important thing you said was we are all seed oil scouts. And the more we all contribute to the app, the more it will grow.
Right.
It kind of sounds like that Wave. Is that the right word? Is this like directions map app where like people report?
Oh, Waze. Yeah. Waze.
People report like, oh, there's a cop on this road, or there's an accident here. And so like the more that like you report something, that may benefit someone's travel experience sometime in the future. So like everyone contribute to it, and follow Seed Oil Scout on Instagram. It's just Seed Oil Scout, no periods. And then download the app in the App Store. If you just search Seed Oil Scout, you should be able to find it.
Yep. 100%. And Yeah, thanks again so much for having me on. This was a great chat. Happy to come on again sometime. Like you said, there's so much to talk about here, from the nutrition to the supply chain to the history. It's kind of an endless thing. American food.
Well, thank you, Anonymous Seed Oil Scout, for coming on. And we'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it.